Hello, I'm Robin and welcome to the January 2022 edition of Molten Music Monthly. It all got a bit busy over Christmas, so I wasn't able to do a December edition, and I am sorely sorry about that. But here we are in a brand new year, a new month, and lots to talk about. I hope you've been enjoying the live streams I've been doing over the last couple of weeks. They've been fantastic with some great guests. We've talked about synthesizers and Rack. We've talked about DIY and NFTs, all sorts of craziness. So do go and check those out if you haven't done already. But meanwhile, coming up this month, SOMA Labs rumbles with the ancient times. VCV Rack goes pro. Hainbach hits a gong. Twisted Electrons blasts beats. BirdKids goes off-grid. Endless Studio goes free and gets crypto. UJam says synths are hard. A Landscape Noon gives us gorgeous passive percussion. Synths releases their educational VCOs and I get to do some learning. Bastl pleases everyone with a Softpop 2. Modular takes on the shared system. Things get simple with Chris St. Auburn. BusyCircuits has a dual filter. TipTop releases the first of the Buchla modules. Someone built a plugin just for hi-hats. AtomoSynth has a Mother 32 beta. Casio, I know, does something cool with text-to-speech. And Roland is 50. But first, Steinberg has announced that they are dropping support for VST2. What could it mean? What could it mean? I don't know. What could it possibly mean? I mean, Steinberg are on a bit of a mission at the moment to tidy things up, to clean things away, do a bit of housekeeping. They are poised to release Cubase 12, apparently, which is going to do the thing where they drop the dongle. I'm just looking for my dongle. I can never find my bleeding dongle. It's the end of the dongle, which is remarkable since there's the sort of thing that Steinberg invented, I think, many years ago. But they are moving on to some other kind of software licensing situation. But that's not what I wanted to talk about. I wanted to talk about the discontinuation of the VST2 platform, which has been around for donkeys and donkeys years. VST2 is a plugin format, the VST plugin format, which has been superseded for about 14 years by the VST3 format. Problem is, no one for some reason can seem to get the hold of the VST3 format, and tons of plugins out there are still in the VST2 format. So it seems that Steinberg are going, look, sod this support for all this really old stuff. We are pushing forward with VST3 because it's very exciting and 14 years old new, and we really should be getting with the program by now. Which, it makes a lot of sense, except for all of these plugins that we use all the time are still VST2. Things like Native Instruments Complete Control, the USynths, the Universal Audio plugins, Sound Toys. There's a whole big list somewhere of all these plugins that are still VST2 and do not have a VST3 version. So potentially we're going to be cutting ourselves off from a lot of stuff that we use all the time, unless those companies can of course get with it and update their systems and release VST3 versions. I mean, at one point Ableton Live, for instance, only got VST3 support in version 10, which was like last year or the year before. So it's a slow moving thing within the industry to move to VST3. And why is that? I don't know. I mean, there's various things knocking around about potentially some problems. I mean, UE is one of those companies that's been quite outspoken about it, that there have been issues with VST3 in the way that MIDI is implemented and MIDI clock is implemented, and that makes things difficult for plugins which rely on that kind of stuff. So, hopefully what this means, if Steinberg are pushing forward with the idea that it's VST3 only, then they also have to put in the work to fix any of the issues that people find with the VST3 format. So hopefully that'll be a positive thing. Apparently Cubase 12 will not support VST2, or will it, or not? I mean, Steinberg have been a bit vague about it, saying, we're going to continue to support VST2 to some degree on some platforms, with some plugins maybe, but ultimately we will be dropping support. This is also tied up in the whole Apple Mac thing, where Silicon M1s and all that kind of thing can support one and can't support the other. And so again, it's that process of moving forward. But this, of course, only really affects Cubase users. Other doors will continue to support the VST2 platform, although I think, as I understand it, you can no longer get a license to make VST2 plugins, so all plugins going forward are going to have to be VST3 anyway. Is it going to work itself out? Probably, but meanwhile, the aforementioned UE and Bitwig have got together to get the clap. Meanwhile, Bitwig and UE have got together to form a sort of open source third-party plugin format called, alarmingly, Clap, which could be awesome. I mean, it's early stages, early days, and perhaps that's the way forward. Perhaps the maintenance of this Steinberg-owned plugin format is perhaps where the problems can lie, because Steinberg makes their own decisions based on their own what they want to do, and that may not be suitable for every other door, and them holding the keys to the plugin format that we all use and is absolutely vital to our day-to-day stuff may be perhaps a problem, and maybe there needs to be a new way forward. Anyway, we shall see. New out from SOMA Labs is the RoAT. RoAT, Rumble of Ancient Times. It's a great name. It's a great company. They release all sorts of boxes that go all sorts of... This one is an 8-bit noise generator and sequencer inspired by early sort of PC games that could fit on a floppy disk, and you had to squish all the music down into absolutely nothing and just made a couple of beeps. Don't know if you recently saw, there was a video I saw on the origins of Prince of Persia, which is absolutely fascinating, built on an Apple Mac 2 and had to fit into 48K the entire game, and go and check that out. But by the by, the Rumble of Ancient Times, it's a crazy box you stick on your desktop, and there's some copper pads that you stick your fingers on and goes, and it makes bleepy bloopy sort of chiptune old computer gamey type music. Fantastic. It has 4 oscillators with tunable waveforms, LFOs that mess everything about. There's an 8-bit resonant low-pass filter for getting those tonal qualities, and is built on kind of ancient technology that they found in an old fridge on a junk pile somewhere. I don't know what it is with SOMA Labs. They're just extraordinary. They seem to pick their way through some kind of bits of old crap in an old second-hand shop they found, pull those bits out, smash them together, and give you some kind of touch plate interface that hopefully you don't electrocute yourself. You will make extraordinary noises and bits of stuff. It's almost as if it's in the building and designing of these instruments is where the inspiration and extraordinariness lies, and maybe not necessarily in the playing of the instrument itself. Who knows? It's just the sort of thing that you slap down and you smash around and you see what happens. And those things are simply full of joy and enjoyment and fantasticness, and long may it continue. And it also feeds into this idea of reusing technology, reusing chips. So you're pulling old bits of technology, old microprocessor boards out of bits of old gear, and repurposing them as synthesizers. I mean, that's an extremely cool idea. Just after I released my November Molten Monthly, VCV Rack Pro 2 burst onto the internet. Just like that. It went boom, and all the servers went down. People went, oh my god, it's version 2, it's version 2. And what is it all about? Well, it's kind of more of the same, really, but much more of the same, and in better places. So VCV Rack, if you're not familiar with it, where have you been all these years, is a fantastic emulation of Eurorack on a computer. So it functions in the same way. In fact, you have many of the same modules, and you can patch them together and create wonderful modular music. It's been awesome, has always been awesome, and continues to be awesome. The most important thing is that they've developed a pro version which will run as a plugin within your DAW, because that's always been the problem, that you can run it standalone and that's great, but there was no way of actually getting it into your DAW without some virtual audio sort of shenanigans and bits and pieces. Whereas now there's a proper plug-in version that will run within your DAW, so you can mix it in with lots of other stuff. They've also overhauled the interface, so it's much nicer to look at. Everything works a bit smoother. It's easier to get to the modules, and the whole thing has been touched up and made nice and new and lovely and fresh, and it runs like a good one. The other thing is that the pro version costs money. You can now give them money in order to have the VST support and also technical support and updates and that sort of thing. Or if that's too much for you, then there still continues to be the free standalone version that has all the same facilities. It just runs by itself as a piece of software, and that remains an excellent thing. The fact that there's still a fully fledged free version that you can play with is extraordinary, and everyone should have it. Everyone should spend some time in there just messing around with signals and control voltages. I mean, to the point that you can get the entire range of Instruo modules within VCV Rack, I think, for free. They released them, a big batch of them last year, but this year they've updated it with a few more as well. And that, if nothing else, is a reason to have VCV Rack running on your desktop. Befaco have put together a whole load of noise in a single module called the Noise Plethora. It has a plethora of noise inside, all sorts of algorithms. There's 2 channels of it, sort of 2 identical channels of noise, both using their own, independent algorithms. You can choose an algorithm and it creates noise, and then you can shape that. It has an inbuilt low-pass filter and sounds awesome. I mean, immediately it throws itself into the job of being a percussion module, perfectly matched with the Percle, also from Befaco, which allows you to shape with envelopes very short type noisy type sounds. But it's such a playable little module. I mean, I've used white noise through the Percle before just to get your snare or your hi-hat type thing going on, but you can do that, and as you extend the decay a little bit with the Noise Plethora, you can start winding in those filters. You can sort of bring the whole thing in and out. You can shape that noise, and there's all sorts of weird grumbles and scrapings and like chains being dragged across gravel type noises going on inside there, that you could actually use them in a more creative fashion than just making ticks and snare type sounds. You could create whole soundscapes with them, filter them through interesting things, control voltage their way all over here as a bedrock behind other melodic sounds crashing in from one side or another. There's a heck of a lot you can do with noise, and I didn't realise there was quite so many versions of noise possible. And if that's not quite enough, then at the bottom it's got this other noise thing. I forget why that's different, but it's different anyway. It has, I think, more standard noise at the bottom, but also with a filter that you can play with. So you essentially have 3 channels of stuff going on. So it's a very versatile, very functional noise. So if you need noise in your system because you're thinking, oh well, I need noise in order to drive my sample and hold, or to do something interesting, to add a little bit of fizz behind something, then get the Plethora, because that just gives you so much more scope and a whole other place to play in. You wouldn't have thought of playing with noise before. You would probably just gone, it's noise, I'm using it as a function of noise to give wind. I want that wind sound. That's what I want, so I'm putting the noise generator in. No, with Plethora, you spend your whole time shaping and crazying and character filling and bubbling and wobbling it, and it's just becomes a whole instrument by itself, I think. I love it. I really enjoy it. I use it a lot. I've also done a build video on it, and it was a complicated build, I have to say, but you can go and check that out. But it's a staple, I think, within my my live rig at the moment. So yeah, nice one. Now, the fabulously eclectic Hainbach has been working on a couple of plugins with various peoples, and this latest one is called the Gong Amp. Made in collaboration with Audio Thing, the Gong Amp is essentially a physical model of an ancient amplifier idea, where you sort of have a box and a pillow and literally a gong, and you're using that as kind of your speaker. So your sound waves are plugged into it in some form, and they resonate through that metallic tuned gong in order to electrophonifies your sound in ways that you hadn't expected. Metallicalizing. Oh, I don't know. So let me try that again. So you've got the horn, your speaker bit, you stick the cymbal, the gong behind it, and it generates interesting resonances and overtones to the sound. Now, Hainbach has taken this idea, which he's done for real, I think, and modelled it into a plugin so you can apply it to all of your audio at any time. You can actually change the materials that are inside this thing, so you can rattle it with chains and pour in ball bearings or something, and you get the kind of sound you would expect. You get metallic sounds, you get rattlings, clangs, scrapes, that kind of stuff going on, which if you're into electromechanical music is just of the gods. So if you're into fascinating and unusual things, then do go and check that out. Twisted Electrons seem to be forever coming up with new boxes full of synthesizers we didn't know we wanted anymore. Or maybe we ever did. Who knows? But next up we have BlastBeats. Now this is taking the chips off a Sound Blaster card and jamming them into a desktop box and revealing all of the controls that we didn't know existed for these sorts of sounds. So it's kind of a chip tune, game tuning, awesome box of percussive, interesting retro lo-fi-ness in a box with some fabulous buttons on the front that make you think like it's something from the 1980s, which it probably is. Now, coming from Sound Blaster, of course it's based on the OPL3 FM chip, because Yamaha ruled the roost with chips in these sorts of sound cards back in the day, both with Sound Blaster and with ad-lib cards as well. And it was the thing that gave games a whole other dimension on the PC. I mean, I remember playing early PC games before having a sound card, and that was completely fine. You would play King's Quest or other such adventure games, and your little speaker in the PC would occasionally go blip, or blip blip, perhaps at the most. And that was fine. But once you added that Sound Blaster card, I mean, wow, horizons opened up. Wing Commander suddenly became this whole other thing with that music as you're running to go to get to the ship. Or my favourite game, which was the Dune game, of course, not Dune 2, the original Dune game, where you fiddled around in the desert and tried to turn the landscape of Arrakis into these little guys doing this sort of action, making plants. That's it, growing plants. That's what I'm trying to say. As you release the water upon the planet and you fly around in an orthocopter, and there was this wonderful landscape coming towards you. It gave this 3D effect. Oh, anyway. But the music in that was just quite extraordinary, and it was all based on this little FM chip. It's like 10 voices, 6 voices of melody, 4 of percussion, or is it the other way around? One or the other, but there's a lot of sound potential within here. And what Twisted Electrons have done has pulled it all out and given you slider control over every single parameter. Yeah, that's right, 4 voices. So, 4 operators, I suppose you could say. And this has got a built-in drum sequencer for running all of the percussive sounds. And there's hundreds of kits stacked inside this box that will just keep you amused for hours, if that's your sort of thing. The BirdKids OffGrid feels like something we've seen various versions of over the years. In fact, I think a year or two ago they had an unsuccessful Kickstarter campaign in trying to launch this thing as a bit of a phone controller. Well, it seems to be back. It's still off-grid, whatever that means. But what you get is this little colourful, spongy buttoned controller. And it's Bluetooth, it's MPE, and it will go into absolutely anything. It's no longer restricted to working on a phone. You can plug it into anything, and it's an instant MIDI controller, whether that's using it for drum pads or using it for playing melodies or controlling stuff. It's also got like gyroscopes built into it or whatever, so you can move it about and that will affect other parameters. So essentially, it's just a joyful little box for tapping and slapping and triggering things and making things go. So you can get off your chair, you can dance around the place and smash this while you're making your music. What a great idea! Fabulous. Let's do that. We seem to find ourselves in one of those places, one of those forks in the road, in terms of internet and technology and what people are talking about. And currently, or what has been over the last 6 months, a hot topic is the whole concept of NFTs and cryptocurrencies. Something which I'm not going to go into particularly, but I'm mentioning it because Endless Studio from Tim Exile has now arrived on Windows, thankfully, so it's now cross-platform. And at the same time that they've released it on Windows, they've also made it free, which is awesome. So let's start there. Endless Studio is a fantastic piece of software, collaborative piece of software that lets people jam together on this loop generative piece of software where you can contribute sounds from anywhere. Now that it's available on the desktop, you can wire it into your DAW, run it as a plugin, feed in software synths, hardware synths, anything you like could be stuffed into it, sampled and looped into this piece of software. Or you can use the inbuilt sounds and just jam along. And anyone with access can contribute and collaborate and produce quite fantastic, complex pieces of music. There's nothing quite like it out there. It reminds me of Rocket Networks back in the day, but this is far more elegant, far more nuanced and usable and fun. It's just fun. You set it going and you play, and you can chat to people who are also playing along, and you can create new loops and then go, no, that's rubbish, go back to an earlier one, try that, go off on a tangent, it branches off and it branches off. And it's a fantastic piece of software, and the fact that it's free means that everyone should have it. You should absolutely have it and play with it and enjoy yourself playing with it. Now, the reason why it's free is because really that's what it was always supposed to be. Tim Exile is very much about collaboration, very much about community. He's very into the idea that these tools should be free for people to just make music, and that should be awesome. Now, where they are going with this is that they want to build in a marketplace into Endless Studio where people can essentially trade loops and riffs with each other, because every time you make music in Endless, it generates a riff which you can then export as a WAV file and use in your project. But wouldn't it be cool perhaps to be able to sell these riffs to other people who'd like to use them, to like you would a sample CD, like you'd sample stuff and sell that onto people. You can now create riffs within Endless Studio and sell and trade those within the Endless marketplace. Now, where this takes a strange turn is that they want that marketplace to be routed as NFTs. Dun, dun, dun. Now, there's a lot of stuff being said about NFTs, and I'm not going to go into any of that right now. But I would just like to explain a little bit that the idea within Endless is that once you export your riff, you can choose to do that as an NFT. It will get minted on a ecologically friendly way of doing that, so in a proof of stake, not a proof of work, nothing to do with Ethereum. It's going to be on some other platform, and once that's created, it will be stamped with the details of everyone who collaborated on that riff. That will be in the smart contract, so then when you sell that to somebody else, everyone gets a little bit of a cut, and if that then gets sold on to somebody else, you get another cut, and so on and so forth. It's an idea of building in monetization upon a digital product that you're releasing and trading and sharing between people on the same platform. It's nothing scary or world killing going on. It's just a marketplace by which these things can happen, and how that works into the whole conversation of NFTs, I have no idea. But I certainly know that I like Tim Exile a lot. I think he's got a lot of interesting things to say. I love the Endless software, and so I'm willing to have an open mind on what it all means and how this is using a technology to enable people to trade with one another. And that ultimately is what's important within the context of the Endless Studio marketplace. But this is a conversation that's going to keep on going. At least I hope it is. I hope we continue to talk about it, because there seems to be a lot of potential of people just shutting down the conversation as if it's not something we're ever allowed to mention, which would be a shame. I think in any situation, things always need to be spoken of and talked about and debated, and that's, I think, vitally important. UJam says that synths are too hard. You can't work it out. What is all this? Oh my goodness, I don't know what I'm doing. So wouldn't it be easy, right? If synths were like easy and that. So UJam has released USynth. It's a synth for you. It's a synth for your lifestyle, for your way of not wanting to be bothered by tricky things like filters or tonal controls. Oh my goodness, no, you just want really, really great sounds with the minimum amount of effort, and that's what USynth seems to be about. Although it still has controls on the front, and apparently you can reveal most of the controls if you want, so I don't really quite sure what it's hiding or offering, except I imagine it comes with a whole stack of presets that you can just surf through and enjoy. And that's fine, but I'm not going to spend any more time really talking about it. UJam USynth is a synth for you, because you don't have the time to learn about synthesis. Somewhat similar, but of being absolutely not similar at all, is Simple by Chris St. Auburn. Simple is a Hallian instrument, and the idea being that the sounds are more curated for you within an interface which offers macro control over a number of different things to simplify the synthesis. So rather than saying synthesizers are too hard and you don't need any controls, you should just surf the presets, Simple sort of calms down the interface and gives you just a couple of knobs which do big things. Now you can get to all of the controls within it, I think, if you want. But the important thing is that you've got three styles of this synth. You've got kind of three different characters that you can take on, and then within them you've got this simple knob that you dial in that just goes crazy on the oscillators. So it's sort of detuning, it's pitch shifting, it's wobbling, it's just adding awesome tonal character to the sound. And that, I think, is the simple aspect. It's not trying to treat you like an idiot, it's trying to give you a whole bank of sounds that you can really easily dial in, because these sounds are put together very much from the perspective of offering you a musical solution. Is it the same thing as the UJam thing? No, it's really not. It's something about the attitude is very different. The attitude from Simple, from Chris, is very much here's a musical idea that I'm going to help you develop, as opposed to here's a bunch of sounds. Off you go. Although there may be some similar intention involved in trying to simplify what you're doing within synthesizers, I think that the sound bank within Simple is just offering you a more of a creative vibe than perhaps a USynth is. It's interesting. You know, now I'm sitting here thinking about it, thinking, so why are they different? But that's definitely the feeling that I get off these two different synthesizers. The only slight downfall of Simple is that it's only available within Hallian, which is not my favourite thing, unfortunately. Now you can run it with the free version of Hallian, so it doesn't really matter. It's just a host for Simple, and once you get it loaded up, once you can figure out how to do that, you then deal purely with the Simple interface. And the sounds inside are great, and I love the fact that there's these three different characters that you can sort of apply to the same situation. And because the interface changes, it just gives a whole different vibe to how you're approaching it. So yeah, interesting stuff, worth trying out. Now, Landscape Noon is kind of as beautiful as the sun at midday. You know, it's just a cheery, hippie, lovely, embracing life, dancing around trees, kind of percussive synthesizer. It looks stunning. It's gold and blue, it's got sliders on it, and it's yellow, and it makes fizzy sounds, and it's completely passive. Which doesn't mean that it sits around not doing anything, it just means that it doesn't require any additional power. Somehow it's powered by its own magic. Let me read what I wrote about it. So you have 8 channels, each with its own unique analog circuit, which is triggered and powered by the incoming gates and control voltages. This creates instability and amplifies the organic attributes of analog circuits as the electrons move and then decay, then move again, load and unload, power and unpower, and so on. And so what you would normally see as something which is perhaps broken is ultimately the point of the exercise. So I think from my point of view, it gets definitely the award of the craziest, zaniest, loveliest, cuddliest, warmest, noisiest, glitchiest box of tricks to come out in a long time. And it's the sort of thing that you could sit under a tree, you know, in the sunshine with your headphones on. I don't know, does it take headphones? Who knows? I think it just emanates vibes that somehow creep into your head and affect your brain. I think that's what it's all about. Synths are on a mission to educate us in the ways of synthesizer design, and it's awesome. Now, I think I might have talked about this before because we've seen it at other points. And in fact, a couple of years ago, I spoke to Gertz at Synths all about this idea of developing some DIY modules at Synths that are educational and are designed to teach as opposed to designed to just be put together. And the first one, the VCO, has arrived, and the second one, I think, probably, I don't know actually what the next one is, probably the VCA will be along very, very soon. The idea is to release them sort of every month. So you build it up like a magazine subscription, you know, that you're gradually building the Cutty Sark over time. But here you're building a Eurorack row of modular, which is pretty awesome. Now, I've started on the VCO, and I did a video on putting it together last Friday. And after a couple of hours, I'd got to page 10 of page 50 of the manual. So it's going to take a bit longer than I imagined. But, you know, that's cool and stuff, because in that time, in that couple of hours of working on this thing on a breadboard, hadn't even got to soldering yet, I learnt an enormous amount about synthesizers and oscillators and what that's all about. How to build a voltage controlled oscillator. What that means, how the pitch is changed, how you shape the waveform, these sorts of things. I mean, I've built plenty of modules, soldered them together, but they really are a question of looking, oh, this resistor goes here, good, solder it in, off you go. There's no, in building modules from kits, that you don't actually really learn anything other than how to solder, which is a useful thing, but you don't learn why these components go where they do, and these absolutely do that. Now, it's a challenge. I was expecting it to be, you know, relatively easy, and I thought I could learn some things, that will be good, but it's actually very challenging, because a lot of the things one expects from a kit, like a bill of materials, like being taken by the hand, like a photo of where everything goes, those things aren't really there. And so you are forced to think harder, to learn, to perhaps do research around these sorts of things, and also take your time putting it together. It's absolutely fascinating. It's a great way to spend some time and to learn about things, and my brain is still going boom. So funnily enough, tomorrow night, which will probably already be past by the time this video actually gets out there, I'm doing the second part of the ErikaSynths VCO build, because I need to get to the soldering and to actually put it together. But I'll talk at length about what I feel I've learned on the way, and the challenges there are, because there are challenges. It's not easy. And you know, doing it as a live stream, I talk about how I'm feeling about it, and I felt quite frustrated at times because I could not get the information that I felt I was due information. I was entitled to know what these things were, rather than having to work it out and having to really think about it. So it's very interesting. But I hope it's been a useful exercise for people, and there are more to come, and I plan to make videos to do live streams, so real raw, this is happening as we do it type live streams on all of the range as they come out. And hopefully I won't look too stupid, although I mean that's the least of my problems, I think, really. So exciting stuff, and they're affordable. They're like about 60 quid each, which for Eurorack is fantastic, and there's a case and there's a power supply and all these things coming too. So yeah, check out the live streams I've done on it already, and there's also a couple of other little live streams as I've tried to work through the manual in between making the proper live stream videos on them, if that makes sense, because it's just too big to do in a single pass. And so I want to get the maximum amount of information and learning out of it as I can, so I'm doing it in between as well. So great stuff. All the manual and the circuits are designed by Moritz Klein, and he's a fantastic educator and YouTuber, and there's loads of really great stuff on his channel on how to tackle circuit design and what it all means and how to put it together. So it's a winning combination of ErikaSynths and Moritz Klein, and if you fancy having a go, you should check out my live streams on them to see exactly what that entails. The original Softpop was a fun box full of wet farts and crazy noises, with these wonderful sliders on the front that was kind of a bit like crossfaders that you could just get into and seriously move stuff about. Well, number 2 is upon us, and it's expanded, it's evolved, it's become a bass synth, percussion synth, a noise synth, a glitch machine. Its patch bay has been enhanced massively, so you're no longer farting around with little patch wires, and have got a proper patch points in order to integrate it better into a larger system. You've got cross modulation going on, sequencing all over the place, and other modulators modulating the modulator that you modulate with the modulator. Because of that wonderful patch bay, you can feed back stuff through other things and just push it around all sorts of crazy places. Somewhere deep inside it is some kind of complex digital brain that's pushing chaos, that's trying to sell you a certain amount of randomization, and is cross-referencing this to that to the other. It's pulling some kind of order out of the chaos of the universe and delivering it to you with 6 sliders that you can cross-modulate back into its own arse. And as ever, it's the funnest fun you're going to have on a desktop box for a long time. Now, ST Modular makes an extraordinary amount of modules. There's just coming out all the time. I mean, the particular thing that ST Modular does is they release PCBs and front panels. They're not interested in building the modules, and that is probably why they have so much time on their hands, because every other module producer is sitting there soldering all day trying to put these bloody things together, whereas they just come up with the idea, build one or two, go, yep, that works, and then that's it. They only have to produce the PCBs and the front panels. It's genius, it is. So that means that you have to get them as kits, or you can buy those bits and then source the components yourself, or you will find there are people who will build them for you. Pusherman Productions is one such place that will offer both kits and fully built from time to time, so do go and check that out if you're interested. But in particular, this month ST Modular is releasing the LANGE Anna. I have no idea whether that's how you say it, but that seems to be how it's spelled. LANGE Anna. It's a super wide 1U module which kind of reflects the Make Noise shared system. If you're not familiar, Make Noise makes this case, URAT case, a bit like this one up here that you can't see. Let's say it's a bit like this one, doesn't really matter. And it has a 1U strip in the middle between the two rows of 3U. And within that, it has a way of routing voltage around the place. It's kind of like a mult and attenuator, so you plug something in over one side and it comes out of different outputs further on down the case to make patching simpler, so you're not dragging big cables around the place. You can very quickly move voltages around the case in very neat and interesting ways. That is what this does. It's essentially a 1 to 4, I think, 1 to 4 mult. So you plug something in one end and it comes ping, ping, ping out all the others. And there's also an expander extra bit for it that you can plug somewhere else to have another one come out. I think that's where the 4 comes in. And you've got 3 channels of that. So 3 lots of molting throughout your case. And it's beautifully put together. It wonderfully lights up. And it's just a simple, elegant way of routing signals around your case without having to drag big cables everywhere. It looks beautiful. I think it's a lovely, lovely idea. And if you haven't plugged things into it, then it becomes an attenuverter and it becomes a voltage generator. And so is, a versatile use of a strip of 1U. The MCF ×2 from BusyCircuits is a dual variable state filter. 2 filters, absolutely identical filters, swapped side by side in a single module. You can set them up in series or in parallel. You can use them in mono in a row, or you could use it as a stereo filter if you wish, and then tie the cutoff knobs to each other. It's simple, it's beautiful, it sounds great. It gives you 2 filters in a relatively small space within your modular that you can use cascaded or together or separately or independently. It's just phenomenally useful. You can end up with a pair of peaks that are sweeping majestically across whatever bass line you're running into it, or other stuff, or as I say, you can use them independently for 2 completely separate things. You've got all the controls you need on both. It's simple, it's good. I've got nothing else to say about it other than the fact, good job, dual filter, useful, thank you. We first saw these at Super Booth that TipTop Audio and Buchla have got together to produce a URAC series of the original 200 series Buchla modular system modules thing. Anyway, they are planning to release these over the course of the year, and the first 2 have become available, kicking off with an oscillator. But it's not just an oscillator, it's a dual oscillator called the 258T. 2 oscillators, identical sort of top and bottom, which offer completely independent controls. The top one is a bit more sawtoothy, the bottom one is a bit more square wavy. It's got, they've both got FM inputs, and they've both got 2 separate outputs as well, which is interesting. And they're not linked in any way, at least as far as I can tell. So it's not as if there's any special normalization going on behind the scenes. They are 2 physically independent oscillators with which you can do what the heck you like. The other module is the quad function generator, also known as the 281T. These are very catchy names, I think you'll find. And it's a function generator with a rise and a fall type envelope that can then be cycled into an LFO. And then you've got either repeating or a sustained version, or just a simple attack release. It's a very wide module, but you are getting 4 envelopes or 4 LFOs. They also offer a strange way of putting them together so that you can combine them into more complex LFOs or complex envelopes using something called the quadrature function or something. Anyway, it's Buchla, it's weird, it's going to be weird, it's going to be slightly strange, it's going to have controls for which we've not really come across before, unless you're familiar with their gear. So it's creating an interesting space within URAC, I think. How well these things will integrate into a larger system, difficult to say. Can you just drop in the dual oscillator and just run that through everything else? I mean, it's going to match up in terms of format, so it is following the URAC format in being 1 volt per octave and such like, and the correct voltages, so it should integrate nicely. It's just one of those things where it's so distinctive, you wonder whether it would work all better within its own system or whether it would sit nicely with other things. Don't know. Interesting though, just terribly affordable, you know, very temptingly affordable. So when did hi-hats become so complicated? That's what I want to know. It's just that ticking going on, isn't it, in the background of things? Well, no, apparently not. Apparently we like to roll, we like to ratchet, we like to do all sorts of interesting drippy things with hi-hats. And so we now have a virtual instrument plugin which is going to sort that out for you. Calling itself Hatz with a Z. This is from Thenatan or something along those lines. And it's an entire hi-hat virtual instrument. It comes with a gazillion samples of hi-hats, so you can sit there spending a week going tss, 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 next one, tss, next one, tss, next one, tss, onwards and onwards through a lot of samples in order to find that particular hat sound you're after. But then you can stuff in all sorts of patterns and ratchets, and you can have them triggered from your keyboard, so it becomes a very sort of performance idea that you can just throw in these patterns which then mess about with your hi-hats. And that's great. I mean, I'm not poo-pooing the idea that hi-hats are interesting, because they have become very interesting of late. It's no longer just a clock signal, it's a very much become an instrument all of itself, and this reflects that. And it certainly beats the hell out of trying to program ratchets and rolls on hi-hats, that's for sure. The AtomoSynth KOE-M6 looks to be like a fascinating take, or almost like a mashup between the Make Noise No Coast and the Mother 32. It's a semi-modular monosynth with a lot of patching and interesting things going on. It has an analog oscillator, but there's also some kind of digital oscillator available via MIDI, which is slightly odd. It has a random voltage modulator built in, some sample and hold. It has those kind of rise and fall type loopable envelopes that we like in a more of a West Coast thing, while staying very much East Coast and subtractive with the filtering and other synthesizer bits and pieces. And at the end of the chain is a very welcome delay line. So interesting. I mean, well priced in around that sort of Mother 32 no coast area, and it gives us what looks like Moog knobs with Make Noise No Coast square lights. So maybe it's just the square lights that are fooling me into think it's something more than it is. But anyway, it's hand built in Peru. It ships in a little case and can be taken out and stuck into your URAC if you so wish, and is like, I mean, to me it just seems like a really cool alternative to something which has become a bit of a classic, you know, almost boring Mother 32 kind of area. Now, Casio spent a whole month, maybe even 6 weeks, teasing us about a new synthesizer coming along. Although how new exactly we couldn't really work out, because it talked about its AIX technology, which is something they've had for quite some time. But what we do know about that is simply that it's a really good, high quality bunch of sounds. So nothing wrong with that. But then finally it's been unveiled, and it's the C2S1000V. Another catchy name there. What's it all about? Well, it's all about vocals, weirdly. The Casio CT-S1000V. As somebody pointed out to me recently, it's like the Mac Talk thing from 20-30 years ago, where you just type in on the screen and the Apple Mac reads it back to you through its little onboard speaker. Is it like that? No, not really. What this is a speech and vocal synthesizer built into this keyboard that allows you to essentially play vocal lines and have them sung in electronic, you know, robotic, vocodering, kind of strange, weird kind of ways, but sung nonetheless. So you can use an app on your iPad or an Android tablet. You can type in entire lyrics, entire songs, stuff that into the memory, and then you can either go one figure trigger and it plays it and sings it all on one note, or you can play each syllable and kind of reveal the lyrics as you play along those notes. It's quite fascinating to some degree. I can't quite see exactly where it could be used in any sense, but it comes with tons of different voices, different styles you can do. But the other thing about it is that it's essentially one of those home keyboard automatic accompaniment systems. So you've got a shed load of sound, you've got hundreds of patterns, you've got loads and loads of automatic accompaniment going on, and it's the sort of keyboard that people like myself cut our teeth on years and years ago when we were kids. And many of us do that, and Casio have also always been brilliant at providing these home keyboards where you can just press a note and it plays a load of stuff and you play on top. And it's immensely enjoyable, and it opens up music and playing to people who are bored of their piano lessons and are just wondering whether there's another way to making music. And it's so ultimately it's delightful, it's fantastic. It's the sort of thing that I'm thinking very seriously about getting one of my kids who's started playing piano, because it might really encourage him to start learning about shapes of chords, about melody lines, about different styles, because it has tons and tons of different styles of drums and percussion and bits and pieces in here that could keep you going forever. And the sounds are top notch, and all of it in about sort of 500 quid's worth of keyboard with built-in speakers. Nowhere near enough controls on the front. There's far too much menu diving for my liking. There's just a kind of 2 multi-purpose knobs on the top. But other than that, it seems like a fun idea. And Casio, I think, have done enough to make people go, oh, well, that's interesting, which is great. So they should build on that and do more interesting, weird and quirky stuff. And finally, Roland is 50 this year. Yes, it was in 1972 that Mr. Roland first put together some kind of weird, strange organ drum machine percussion system. I think it was the first thing that rolled out. And from there, of course, we know it developed into CR78 and then into 808s and 303s and 909s, 101s. Lots of numbers of synthesizers and bits and pieces. And so over on the Roland website, they are celebrating this with this wonderfully informative and historical timeline, taking you through all of the developments over the years and the key instruments that happened at the time. It's fascinating, really. It's interesting to see how each decade, if you like, shaped the way the technology changed and evolved and enhanced. It went good, it went bad, it went, all sorts of different ways. And it's interesting to see how that relates to what we have now, and how all of this history has kind of been reworked into their boutique versions, into their Xenology versions. Is that a good idea? Is that a bad idea? Who knows? But Roland continue to be a fascinating company, and their products continue to fascinate, continue to be cloned left, right and centre, and people have a huge demand for these boxes. There's something about the character or the heart of those machines that have made them just so ubiquitous, made them so powerfully emotive to many people. Fascinating stuff. Roland have said that they are going to be releasing some various things through the year, some classic nods at bits and pieces, some new yet old things. What does that mean? It's difficult to know with Roland, because they've said many times that they're not interested in going back particularly to redo what they've done, except then they're constantly redoing what they've done in plug-in form and in virtual analog form in some way or form. So don't really know exactly what they're saying or where they're going, but let's just keep our eyes open. Their actual birthday is in April, so at that time we should see, hopefully, something phenomenal. Let's just go with that. Let's just assume it's going to be phenomenal. I mean, I've got a massive soft spot for Roland. I even like the new stuff. I'd love a Jupiter X. I like the Xenology stuff. It's all good, and I completely understand people's love of things like the 808 and the 303 and why they'd all like to have a proper Jupiter 8. I get all of that too. But hey, what are you going to do? Okay, that'll do us. I think that's plenty for the beginning of this year. Yes, I hope that was interesting or informative or something. Coming up this Sunday the 30th of January, we're going to get together, have a beer, glass of wine, maybe a biscuit, and talk about these last couple of months, Molten monthlies, what's it. We're also going to talk about the live streams and how they went, what questions came up, what interesting bits and pieces, all that sort of stuff. We're just going to sit back and chat and talk and see how everybody is and see where we are starting this new year and the exciting things going forward. So that's this Sunday. Do come along. So yeah, if you enjoy the content and bits and pieces that I do, there's loads and loads of videos in the channel. I cover synthesizers, I cover Modular, I cover the Surface Pro from Microsoft, software, sometimes audio interfaces, MIDI controllers, DIY, interviews with fabulously interesting people, and all that stuff. Please do subscribe, and if you're super interested in supporting me, then you'll find that I'm also on Patreon, where you can throw me a couple of quid. There's an awesome bunch of people on there. That would be fantastic. Thank you. And in the meantime, go and make some tunes.